Hi. I want to talk to you about drawing. Now, I started to draw when I was in my late 30s, really. And I started drawing not because I wanted to make art. It really wasn't my interest. I didn't want to make stuff to hang on the wall. I didn't want to get stuff framed. I didn't want to enter, competitions at the local watercolor society. I wanted to get a feeling. And that feeling comes from slowing my brain down, from engaging with something, with really looking at it carefully, with taking a pen and putting it on paper and slowing down. And I started to carry a sketchbook around with me and to record these little moments in my life that, I don't know, they weren't particularly significant probably, but they were the stuff that made up my day. What I had for lunch, person I talked to, a meeting I was in, the view out the window, a visit to a museum, some books I was reading, my dog sleeping on the couch. Little moments that kind of added up to, well, that's what my life is made of, all that, those little tiny moments. And over time I started to fill more and more sketchbooks, and eventually I had a whole shelf full of these books, and they were sort of an autobiography of sorts of all these little moments. Now, when I set out to start making art, I also knew I didn't have a lot of time. I had a job. I was creative director of an ad agency, and I had a family, and my son was growing up. I live in New York City. It's always busy. There's always a million things to do. And so I knew I didn't have time to get a lot of equipment. I didn't have time to take classes. I didn't have time to really learn a lot of techniques. I'd have to kind of make it up as I went. And I'd have to figure out how making art could fit into these little moments in my life. I wrote a book recently called Art Before Breakfast, and that kind of summarized my philosophy, which was, can I take the 10 minutes while the kettle is boiling or I'm waiting for the toaster to pop to just make a little drawing, maybe of the kettle boiling or of that piece of toast? Can I fit art into these cracks, little spare moments, rather than, looking at Facebook on my phone or, staring blankly at the wall? Can I find art a place in my day? And that's what I've done now for, quite a while. And I've had a lot of really interesting experiences because of it. Now, that's what I really wanted to share with you today, was the chance that you have to capture your life and to make it, well, to see how rich it is, to see how beautiful it is, to see how interesting it actually is, how these moments, when you draw them, become deeper and more meaningful. So I want to take you through all the different kinds of journaling that I do, because, there's so many different forms that illustrated journaling can take. And, well, for instance, here's a day in my life. It's just a regular Friday. And just to show you kind of super mundane things I did in this kind of comic book version of an illustrated journal. Here I'm getting up and my girlfriend is still sleeping in bed. I have a cup of tea and a bowl of cereal. I sit at the computer for a little while. I make a few phone calls. I eat lunch. I go to the gym. I take a shower, feed my dogs, etc., etc. That is a day, Friday. So there it is, recorded for posterity. Here's a moment sitting on a bus, looking out the window, watching the traffic and the stuff outside. Instead of getting frustrated, I got out my pen. Here's just a lousy day I had, so I wrote down what were the lousy moments. Now they're in the book. I can turn the page, get on with my life. Here's a little kind of song that I made, a little comic strip about unpacking my bags, in this case, on the business trip. Here's just the first 5 minutes of my day. Waking up, seeing the first thing I see out of my opening eyes, the wall opposite my bed. And then one of my dogs wakes up and wants to know it's the time to get up. I stagger out of bed, go to the bathroom, fill the kettle, watch my other dog go out onto the balcony and sniff the morning air. There it is, the first couple minutes of my day captured in watercolor. Food, I eat it. And so I recorded my book. A bagel, an apple. Here's the whole process of an apple being eaten. It's a kind of a dramatic adventure story of this apple slowly turning into a core. some leftovers before and after I eat them. Waiting for a plane to leave the airport. Again, dead time, right? Sitting there, people are napping, people are reading James Patterson novels. I get out my pen, do an investigation of the plane. Are all the bolts in the right place? Are any of the windows open? Driving cross country, as my girlfriend drives, I draw the dashboard. Then I draw the road stretching endlessly ahead. In Paris, I draw my feet. I draw a baguette. I draw a bridge. I notice the similarities between the shapes of things. I write down my notes of my thoughts. I go to Rome and I draw all the domes, including there at the bottom, my own sweaty one. Thailand, Bangkok, beautiful place. So many different things to draw, so many different ways to draw them. Sedona, beautiful rock outcropping that sat above my hotel, so I did a watercolor of it. I love to record my dogs. They're interesting. They do so many different things. So here's a watercolor of them. They're two brothers. Going to the Natural History Museum, going and drawing skeletons and dinosaurs and the like. Going to a sheep farm and drawing some future sweaters. An owl that strangely enough was at a party I went to at the beach. Or some animals at the zoo standing around, carefully being observed by me. Some chickens in Beijing, scrapping around on a scrap heap looking for pickings. Here, I like to sort of investigate and form connections between things, see how they differ. This is an example, the Country Music Hall of Fame in Nashville. I drew all the necks of all the famous instruments that were once played by famous mandolins and banjo pickers. Sitting on the beach, studying waves. They're so interesting. How do they move? They're impossibly hard to draw. They're constantly moving. You start to look for patterns, but they're always changing. You know, Da Vinci did this. He was much better at it than I am. Orange soda. There's so many different kinds, different shades of orange, different bottles. Study them, draw the connections between them. Or dogs in coats. New York is full of them. Different kinds of coats. Why are they all dressed up? I was in Beijing, and I drew a whole series of drawings on cardboard of the festivals, of the three-wheeled bikes, of people dancing in parks after work. This is a drawing of a cup of coffee, but thinking about where do all the components of this cup of coffee come from? Kind of a global analysis, most of it made up, but I don't know, maybe I was right. My hands, here they are, the most incredibly important and useful tools I own. They do so many different things for me, so I kind of pay tribute to them. Walking down my street, I noticed so many things being thrown away, and I thought about all those things, poor things, once so cherished, once, people paid good money for them. Here they are now lying on 3rd Street, unwanted. Or schlepping. It's a New York word. It means carrying junk around. New Yorkers do it all the time. We don't have cars. We don't have trunks. So we have backpacks and dollies and all kinds of junk. So I recorded that. I've also done kind of illustrated memoirs to sort of investigate my past, my family. I traveled a lot as a kid. Here's a map of all the different places I lived before I was 10 or 11. Here's my great-grandparents and my grandparents and my mother when she was a baby. My grandparents around the time of their first date. And here, my in-laws, my father-in-law who played the accordion when he was a kid. And drawings of me as a kid. Pull out the old family album and just study those drawings and kind of think about those times in depth. Here's me and my friend Ali when I was 2, talking about what it was like to travel on a plane back in the day when you had to get dressed up to fly. The itinerant snake charmer that would come to our house with his cobra and charm him and us. Maps, I love maps. I love to draw them. Here's a map. When we drove cross country, I painted all the states we didn't go through. Or here's a kind of higgledy-piggledy version of our route. This is the view out of a window, flying across country and looking at the chunks of America that passed underneath my window. And Manhattan, strangely enough, is a place where people fish. I didn't really think about it until I started to investigate. And so I drew a map of all the different ways that people like to fish. And as I was doing, I realized Manhattan is shaped like a fish. So I used that as a map and placed all these different people and all these different stories on my map. I also like to fill my journal with tributes to the people whose art I admire or whose books I'm reading and who influence me. Or to make little stories. This is a weird thing that I did where I drew every single person who was on death row, and I wrote a little paragraph about why they are there and what they did. Kind of a tragic thing, but I spent a fair amount of time doing this, during these little watercolors. I filled about a dozen pages of my journal with these stories. And then I went around and I met all the homeless people in my neighborhood, and I drew them, and I talked to them, and I bought them lunch, and I heard their stories, and I learned a bit about them. So there are so many different ways that you can investigate the world. I mean, field trips, here's another example. Going to a museum, rather than just walking through and reading stuff, or taking Instagram pictures, as I see so often people doing. You can stop and pause and pull out your sketchbook and just draw what you see and write down what you think about it. You know, this is LACMA in Los Angeles, is drawing snippets of bits of art that were interesting to me, or going to a museum of natural history and drawing some gigantic skeleton. Or here's a field trip to the west side of Manhattan, where the sanitation department has their garage where they fix garbage trucks. So I plunked down on a hot summer day and drew some trucks. They're really complicated, they're really cool, they have all kind of bits and pieces. You know, I think it's really interesting to do a drawing and to break it down and to explain to people how something works. To use drawings to do that. IKEA does it, so do I. Here's a few examples, actually from friends of mine and from students of mine, doing drawings of, for instance, how to make a piece of toast, or how to brew some coffee, or how to use a vacuum cleaner properly, or even how to use the complicated intersection of your different remote controls to operate your DVR and your DVD player and so forth, or how to drive a stick shift, break it down to a bunch of pictures. That's kind of fun. I also like to use my journal to draw, well, the most accessible model in my life, which is me. Sit down with a mirror in the morning and just draw myself each morning to a quick sketch. How do I feel today? It's an interesting experience because every drawing is completely different. Why? I look slightly different perhaps, but I am different. So the artist is different, the emotions are different, the experience is different, the mood is different, and so all the drawings are completely different. And my journal becomes a record of these moods, of these inner states that I may not even realize I'm feeling when I'm doing the drawing. And suddenly later on I look back and go, oh, that's what was going on. Okay. So there are a million ways to use your Illustrated journal. There are thousands of things you can put in them. It's a really exciting adventure. I've been doing it for a long time because I'm so passionate about it, because it's so interesting. It's such a great experience from a creative point of view, to draw connections between things, to see patterns, to see in more depth into things, to understand the relationships between completely random ideas. Illustrated journaling allows you to bring them together. It's also a great way to make art, to experiment with media, to try out new things. It's just a page in your journal. If you screw it up, turn the page. Nobody cares. You can try it again. There's 1,000 different ways to make interesting art between the pages of a book. Have fun. I hope you'll enjoy doing it too.